Let me ask you a strange question, and I want you to really think before you answer. When was the last time you did something, bought something, said something, posted something without wondering what others would think? Think about it. Go deep. For most people, that memory is hard to find, because we live in a world where every decision carries the invisible weight of other people's judgment. You choose your outfit thinking about who's going to see it. You don't send the message because you're afraid of seeming like too much. You swallow your opinion because you don't want conflict, and while you do all of that, while you bend, mold, and erase yourself to be accepted, your life passes by. Now I'm going to tell you about a man who lived in the 16th century, in a France torn apart by religious wars, epidemics, and political chaos. A man who lost his best friend, nearly died at 38 in a horse-riding accident, and after all of that did the most radical thing any human being can do. He stopped caring about what others thought, but not in a shallow way you might be thinking. He discovered something that modern psychology took centuries to prove, that the obsession with other people's approval is the primary source of human suffering, and that liberation, true freedom, begins when you turn your gaze inward. That man's name was Michel de Montaigne, and what he discovered can radically change the way you live if you're willing to listen. Michel de Montaigne was born in 1533 in southwestern France. He was the son of a nobleman with a progressive mindset. His father had him learn Latin as his first language before French, and he grew up being woken by musicians instead of alarm clocks. In 1559, he secured a position as a magistrate. But it was there, in that courthouse, that he met Etienne de la Bouteille, and the two built one of the deepest friendships in the history of Western philosophy. Montaigne would later write about it with a phrase that became famous forever. Because it was him. Because it was me. That was the only explanation he had for the depth of that bond. And then, in 1563, La Bouteille died of dysentery. Montaigne was 30 years old, and something in him broke, or perhaps opened. In the years that followed, he continued his career, got married, had children. But in 1571, at 38 years old, he made a decision that history never forgot. He withdrew to the tower of his castle, surrounded himself with books, and spent the following years writing about himself. Not about politics, not about theology, not about great battles or heroes, about himself, about his fears, his contradictions, his habits, his mistakes. The result was the essays, a work that invented an entire literary genre and influenced Shakespeare, Descartes, Nietzsche, Freud, and virtually every Western thinker who came after. 5. Facts about Montaigne that reveal who he truly was. He had 57 quotes engraved on the ceiling of his library, his favorite phrases to meditate on every single day. He publicly admitted that he feared pain, that he was lazy, and that he changed his mind with ease at a time when that was unthinkable for a public man. He suffered a serious horse-riding accident and lost consciousness, and afterward described the state between life and death with a disarming calm, without any drama. He never wanted the essays to look like a finished book. He wanted them to look like a man still being written, still being discovered. He said that knowing oneself was the only real way to know the world, not the other way around. But what does any of this have to do with you? Everything. Before we go on, I need to make something very clear. When Montaigne talks about stopping caring, he is not preaching indifference. He is not telling you to turn your back on the people you love, abandon your commitments, or treat the world with contempt. He's talking about something else. He's talking about stopping the outsourcing of your self-worth. There is a massive difference between caring about people and caring about what people think of you. The first is love. The second is emotional dependency dressed up as virtue. Montaigne identified something that psychology today calls an external locus of control. When your sense of personal value depends on sources outside of yourself. The like, the compliment, the approval, the recognition. And he realized that living this way is a sophisticated form of imprisonment. He wrote in the essays, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." Think about that phrase. To know how to belong to oneself. Not to your boss, not to your family, not to social media, to yourself. 6 signs that you are living for other people's approval. You take a long time to make simple decisions because you keep imagining how others will react before you act. You feel bad after posting something on social media if the engagement numbers fall below what you expected. You change your opinion in conversations depending on who's listening, and you rarely even notice that you do it. You feel an inexplicable anxiety when someone doesn't reply to your messages quickly. You remember the criticism you've received far more than the compliments, and they keep spinning around in your head. You frequently do things you don't want to do simply to avoid disappointing people. If you identified with 2 or more of those, welcome to the club. Most of us were raised this way. The question isn't about blame. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? Imagine a man named Thomas. Thomas is 34 years old, a marketing manager. He has a nice apartment, a decent car, enough followers to feel relevant. From the outside, everything seems to be working, but Thomas can't sleep well. Not because he has too many problems, but because he keeps replaying the day's conversations, analyzing whether he said the right thing, whether he came across as smart enough in the meeting, whether the post he made could have been misunderstood. Thomas has a mental checklist of achievements he needs to reach in order to finally feel like enough. When he gets the promotion, when the project works out, when he loses those 5 pounds, when he finally looks like he has everything under control. The problem? Every time he checks something off the list, the next item is already there waiting. The finish line never comes. Sound familiar? One day, by chance, Thomas stumbles across a video about Montaigne, and he hears a phrase that stops everything inside him. Every man carries the full form of the human condition, and there, at 2 in the morning, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but a small crack appears in the armor he spent decades building. He begins to realize that he isn't running towards something. He's running away from something, running from the silence, running from himself. For behaviors that reveal you are running from yourself, you fill every free moment with external stimulation, podcasts, shows, social media, and feel genuine discomfort when silence shows up. You define yourself almost exclusively by what you do, your profession, your achievements, your titles, not by who you are as a person. You struggle to be alone without feeling lonely, as if your own company simply isn't enough. You rarely or never ask yourself what you truly want, without first filtering it through other people's expectations. Thomas recognized all 4, and from that point, he began a journey that Montaigne described 450 years ago with unsettling precision. Let's talk about the concrete lessons, because Montaigne wasn't just a poetic philosopher. He was a clinical observer of human nature, and many of the things he wrote in the 1570s and 1580 seconds have been confirmed by psychological research in the 20th and 21st centuries. Lesson 1. Contradiction is constitutional, not a flaw. Montaigne said, "I am not able to keep still. I am inconstant, contradictory, uncertain." And he didn't say that with shame. He said it as a factual observation. Modern psychology, especially personality theory, confirms it. Human beings are naturally plural. You can be brave and cowardly, generous and selfish, confident and insecure depending on context, moment, and mood. Toxic self-criticism is born when you decide you need to be consistent all the time, that any contradiction is weakness. But Montaigne would say, your contradiction is your humanity. Lesson to death as a teacher of life. After the horse-riding accident, Montaigne briefly lost consciousness. When he came back, he described the state as something surprisingly serene, and that led him to a practice he called meditatio mortis, meditating on death, not to become depressed, but to become free. Today, we call this terror management theory, the awareness of our own mortality. When processed in a healthy way, increases the authenticity of our choices. You start doing things because they truly matter to you, not because they impress others. Lesson 3. Self-knowledge is a process, not a destination. Montaigne never claimed to know himself completely. His entire writing project was the opposite. He wanted to catch himself in the act, to observe himself changing, to notice his inconsistencies in real time. Modern positive psychology, especially Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, points in the same direction. People who treat identity as fixed suffer more. People who treat identity as a process have far greater emotional resilience throughout their lives. Lesson for ordinary experience is deep enough. Montaigne wrote about everything. How he liked to eat, how he slept, what it felt like to have kidney stones, the pleasure of a good glass of wine. And he was deliberate about it. For him, greatness lived in the ordinary, not the extraordinary. This resonates directly with what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi discovered about flow and happiness. The most satisfied people are not those with extraordinary lives. They are the ones who find depth in the simple things of everyday life. Lesson 5. Judgment is projection. Montaigne observed that when we judge others harshly, we are almost always judging in ourselves what we don't want to see. And when we obsessively seek approval, we are projecting onto others the judge who actually lives inside us. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress and then see in others. Montaigne didn't use that vocabulary, but he arrived at the same conclusion half a millennium before Jung. Lesson 6: Fun and lightness are forms of wisdom. One of the most surprising things about Montaigne is his humor. He laughed at himself constantly. He laughed at his flaws, his phobias, his failures in his love life, his ailing kidneys. The psychology of humor has shown that the ability to laugh at yourself is correlated with low neuroticism, high resilience, and stronger genuine social connection. Montaigne knew this by intuition. Excessive seriousness is armor, not a virtue. Lesson 7: Deep friendship is a mirror of the self. About La Boétie. Montaigne wrote that their friendship was so complete it was impossible to separate where one ended and the other began. But far from being fusion in a pathological sense, that friendship made him more himself, not less. Research on relationships in psychology, especially John Cacioppo's work on loneliness, shows that deep and authentic connections don't cause us to lose our identity. They allow us to develop it with far greater security. Now we've reached the point that most philosophy videos avoid, because talking about detachment is easy. Applying it is another story. Here are 5 truths that Montaigne understood and that most of us only discover the hard way. 5 truths nobody realizes about stopping caring. Truth 1: Stopping caring about other people's opinions will push some people away from you. And that is exactly the sign that it's working. Relationships that only survive when you are being who the other person wants you to be are not relationships. They are performance contracts. Montaigne said, to teach others, you must first be yourself. Truth to detachment will look like selfishness to those who benefited from your need for approval. When you stop seeking validation, the people who used it as currency become confused and sometimes angry. That is not a sign that you did something wrong. It's a sign that the old system is being challenged. Truth 3: You will have to endure the discomfort of inner silence before you feel the freedom. Montaigne spent months in retreat before he began to feel the real benefits. Silence first reveals the noise you were avoiding. It's unsettling, but it's necessary. Truth for authenticity is not a permanent state, it is a daily practice. You will slip, you will seek approval again, you will compare yourself, and that's okay. Montaigne contradicted himself hundreds of times throughout the essays. The goal is not perfection, it is to return, always to yourself. Truth 5: When you stop caring about what others think, you start caring more about what you actually think. And then something surprising happens. Your decisions become clearer. Your relationships become more honest. Your work takes on more meaning. Not because the world changed, but because you started living from a real center. 5 mistakes people make when trying to not care. Mistake 1: Confusing detachment with apathy. Healthy detachment is full presence without dependency on outcome. Apathy is total absence. Montaigne was deeply engaged with life. He had simply stopped needing life to bend to his expectations. Mistake 2: Using detachment as an emotional shield. Some people adopt the facade of detachment to avoid vulnerability. I don't care becomes armor, not liberation. But Montaigne was vulnerable in the essays to a point that was genuinely unsettling. Authenticity requires courage, not a shield. Mistake 3: Thinking it's a fast process. Montaigne took decades. You are not going to free yourself from external validation in 1 week because you watched an inspiring video. The process is slow, non-linear, and full of setbacks. Honor the process. Mistake for isolating yourself instead of connecting authentically. The solitude Montaigne practiced was a tool for self-knowledge, not a flight from people. He had close friends, participated in politics, received visitors. The retreat was to find himself again, not to disappear from the world. Mistake 5: Replacing other people's approval with narcissistic self-admiration. Stopping the search for external approval doesn't mean becoming your own unconditional fan. It means learning to observe yourself honestly, including your flaws, without destroying yourself in the process. Self-compassion, not self-worship. Let's go back to Thomas. 6 months after that late night with the Montaigne video. He is still a marketing manager. He still has the same apartment and the same car. But something has changed. He stopped checking his Instagram metrics before bed. Not because he forced himself, but because he realized they never made him feel better. He started writing in a notebook, not to publish, not to impress, but to listen to himself. He started saying no to commitments he used to accept only out of guilt or fear of disappointing people. He lost 2 acquaintances in the process, people who liked the malleable version of him. But he deepened 3 friendships that became genuinely real, and for the first time in years, he started sleeping well. Montaigne wrote, "Every man carries the full form of the human condition. That means you already have everything you need, not in the form of achievements or approvals, but in the form of experience, reflection, and the capacity to reinvent yourself." 3 practices based on Montaigne to start today. Write about yourself without an audience. Not a diary to publish, a diary to know yourself. Observe your contradictions without judgment, just as Montaigne did in the margins of his books. Practice meditatio mortis in a modern way. Once a week, ask yourself, if I knew I had little time left, would I still be doing this? Not to depress yourself, but to prioritize what is real. Do one thing each day that you would do even if no one ever knew about it. A choice that is entirely yours, with no audience. That is the muscle of detachment being trained one day at a time. Montaigne died in 1592, at 59 years old, while attending Mass. Until the very end, he kept revising the essays, adding notes in the margins, questioning what he had written years before. He never considered himself finished. He never considered himself complete, and paradoxically, it was precisely that openness, that refusal to lock himself into a finished version of himself, that made him one of the most complete minds in all of human history. Montaigne's philosophy is not about indifference. It is about belonging to yourself before belonging to anything or anyone else. When you stop caring about what others think, you don't become cold or distant. You become more present, more honest, more capable of connecting for real, because you are no longer managing an image. You are being a person, and there lies the most beautiful paradox of all of this. When you stop chasing approval, that is when the most valuable people start drawing closer. When you stop pretending to be perfect, that is when real connections begin. When you stop needing everything to go right, that is when things start to go right. Not because the universe rewarded you, but because you are finally living from a real place. If this video touched something in you, if you recognized a pattern, an escape, a mask, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and tell me in the comments which of Montaigne's lessons resonated with you the most. See you in the next video.